We're going to be looking at lines. In this part one of the video, we're going to look at how to solve for y, identify the slope, and the y-intercept. First of all, m is the letter that we represent for the slope of the line, and b is the y-intercept. So let's just take a look at these graphs. So this first graph, what is the slope of the line? Well, if you think about it, if you've ever been skiing, we're talking about how the line slants. And so you can pick anywhere on the line. Sometimes it's nice to kind of pick a direct point. So I'm going to pick that point, and I'm going to go, I'm going to go to that point and say, well, how do I get there going up and over? So if I went up to and over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think. So I went up to and over 6. So the slope is 2 over 6, or 1/3. If you think about it, it's like stairs. So I could have taken this point and gone up to and over 6, up to over 6, and if I had a bigger graph, you would see that pattern would continue. But what about the y-intercept? Now remember, this is the y-axis. Where does the graph cross the y-axis? Well, here it crosses at -2. So it's just nice to be able to identify the slope and the y-intercept from a graph. Let's look at this next one. Okay, so let's say I pick this point and I want to end up here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went down 4, but then I went over to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the slope down 4, that would be negative. And when I went over 6, I went to the right, which is positive. So the slope is -2/3. So let's just pause right now and notice that when you had a positive slope here, you went uphill from left to right. But here you had a negative slope and you went downhill from left to right. It's always good to note that positive slopes go up, negative slopes go down. So what about that y-intercept? Well, again, where does it cross the y-axis? Right here, and I believe that is at +4. Well, what about these next two lines? Those look interesting. It's flat. So I could pick any point to any point and say, well, how far did I go up from here to here? 0. How did I go over? Well, I could pick this point, said I went over 1, this point I went over 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick 6 because my slope is up, over. That's always going to be 0. A horizontal line always has 0 slope. But what about that y-intercept? Does it cross the y-axis? Well, yes, it does. It crosses at +3. Well, let's look at this next one. So if I pick a point here, and I pick a point here, and I go, okay, from here I went up 1, 2, 3. But did I go side to side any? No, 0. So let's see, that slope is 3 divided by 0. Can we divide by 0? Never. That is undefined. Some textbooks call that no slope, but I really don't like that. It's undefined. So you might want to think about that making a big U, and that's undefined. Well, what about the y-intercept? Does it ever cross that y-axis? I don't think so. So that would be none. So horizontal lines have a slope of 0, and they do have a y-intercept, but vertical lines do not have a y-intercept, and their slope is always undefined. So let's see if we can not just look at pictures but do some math. You're going to have to write your answers in slope-intercept form, and that's y equals mx plus b. You're probably familiar with that. So again, m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So you're going to be asked to solve for y. And then tell me what the slope and y-intercept is. Because you have to solve for y first, so it's in this format because there's m and there is b, but that only works when y is by itself. So how can we take this and get y by itself? maybe move the 3x. Y is not quite by itself, so it's being multiplied by negative 4. So let's divide by negative 4. And instead of drawing one big line, let's draw little lines. So we have y equals, and we can reduce this fraction, that's negative 5 over 2. A negative over a negative is positive 3/4 x. Now that's not quite in this format because we have mx plus b, and here the x is second. We could leave it like that, but let's go ahead and turn it around. Y equals 3/4 x, it's positive, and then minus 5/2. So the slope is always the coefficient of x. It does not include x. The y-intercept is that other number, and in this case would be negative 5/2. Look at that example, all those fractions. There's a couple of different ways we could handle that. We could move the x over and see what happens. But if you have kind of that disease called fraction phobia, well, let me show you what you can do. Let's get rid of all those fractions. Look for the least common denominator between 3 and 5, and that's 15. So we could multiply everything by 15, including not the fractions, and let's just get rid of those fractions. So 3 goes into 15 5 times, and we want to multiply all that together. 5 goes into 15 3 times, and again we want to multiply all that together. So we want to leave our negative, we've got that there, and then we have 3y, and we have to multiply that together. Nothing cancels, so that's negative 45. So if you're afraid of fractions, get rid of them if you have an equation. So now we can move the x over to the other side, then divide by negative 3, and again do it individually. And you can reduce that. I believe that's positive 15. Negative over negative is positive 10/3 x. And again, we could rearrange it as this is 10/3 x plus 15. The number in front of x is m. The other number is b. So the slope is 10/3 and the y-intercept is 15. More than one way to work that answer, to work that problem. This is just a suggestion for you to be able to get rid of the fractions if you're afraid of them or you don't like them. Okay, let's look at this one. Much easier looking. Well, I can solve for y, but do you notice that something's missing? What's missing? The x. But that's okay. Let's solve for y. So this time I'm going to move the 15 to the other side and divide by 5. So if I compare this to my slope-intercept formula, you should notice that that's missing. There is no x. What does that tell you about m? It tells you that m is 0 because 0 times x would be 0 and that it would not be there. It tells you this other number is the y-intercept. Now think about that. What kind of line has a slope of 0? Go back up here. Remember, a horizontal line has a slope of 0. A vertical line has a slope that's undefined. So anytime you run across where the slope is 0, you should automatically know that that's a horizontal line. So let's make another observation about this problem. When there is no x, then you have a horizontal line. And again, the horizontal line, the slope, is always 0.